digitaljamsessions.com. Hello and welcome to this Digital Jam session. We're coming at you live from DNA VR in Camden in London. And we have with us the lovely Marta, who's back again. And we have the team from DNA. So why don't you introduce yourselves to our lovely listeners? I'm going to start with you, Marta, because you've been on the show before. So just as a brief reminder to those who were not paying attention last time, why don't you tell us who you are, what you're up to?
Hi, everyone. I'm Marta. You've probably heard me speaking on here a few times now. So I am a marketer turned mocap performer, and I am basically obsessed with all things gaming, community management, VR, new media, anything to do with that. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. And Alex, why don't you explain a bit more about
Hello, everyone. My name is Alex. You definitely haven't heard me speaking on this podcast yet. I am the co-founder and director of DNA VR, and we have started 1 month and a couple of weeks ago, and we're supposed to grow, I hope.
Hi there, I'm Anastasia, and I'm the other co-founder of the DNA VR, and I would say that's it for now.
Wonderful. Well, I will mention that we are in the DNA building at the moment with its rather squeaky floors. So if you hear creeping and squeaking, that's because people are moving around and they're trying to do so on a rather squeaky floor. Having said all of that, what I wanted to do today was talk about what Marta so nicely put as new beginnings, because there are a lot of people who are in the scenario that you guys are in from DNA in terms of stepping into the VR industry, and especially the VR arcade industry for the first time. And I think it's fair to say that there isn't exactly a roadmap for success here. So I think for a lot of people, there's a lot of new folks who are moving into this industry, and they're coming with different backgrounds, different experiences that they're bringing into the mix. And so the first thing I want to do is just kind of get a little bit of a sense of what your backgrounds were before you stepped into this VR arcade industry.
Our background was kind of boring, I would say. We both did economics and then masters in management, so it's definitely non-tech related in any way.
And non-VR related, so I would say it's our first experience in terms of virtuality.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, with regards to like tech itself, we tried it before, obviously,
you followed, obviously.
Yeah, the trend. We've tried it somewhere in Lincoln, I think, somewhere north of the UK, and we quite liked the experience. I think we saw a couple of things that we could definitely do better. But for now, I would say that we started with focusing on the product itself, and so far our marketing is somewhat humble, but for everyone who's starting this thing ever, I would say do focus on the tech, and it's harder than you can imagine, because setting up just one is quite simple. I'd say my 7-year-old sister can do that, but 10 headsets the same place can give you quite a lot of headache, to be honest.
Okay, we're going to dig into that one in a moment or two. But before we do, Marta, let's talk about what you were doing before you decided to dive into motion capture of all things.
I mean, I kind of come from a similar-ish background. I had studied business as well. I did the whole thing that the parents wanted, where it's, I went all the way to got a master's as well. But in parallel to that, I've always been a geek. So it's been a journey of turning that thing that my mom kept yelling at me about when I was a kid, like, go to bed. I'm like, no, 5 more minutes, and turning that into a career, essentially. So that's how I came into mocap, with my very particular set of skills. But
hold on a minute, we have to pause there. In Liam Neeson style, why don't you just explain about those very particular set of skills? Because I know for a fact, Missy, you have some swords at home. Why don't you explain a little bit about that?
Well, first, they're entirely legal. Disclaimer. No, I do. I've been a geek, and I love those really sort of cinematic games, or as cinematic as games got in the 90s and thereafter, obviously. And at the same time, I also, studied combat, Eastern, Western, all these different things, and eventually found stage combat and things like that. So how to do cool things without actually hurting people, which is always fun. And legal again.
Violence without violence. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And also, you know, the magic of how these things get done. I'm one of those people, I find something that sort of, you know, it leaves me in wide-eyed wonder. I'm not one of the people that says, oh, that was cool. It'd be cool to do that one day, and then forget about it. I'm already Googling it. You know, I'm already Googling how to do it. So one thing led to another, and then I found motion capture and kind of saw that it was the combination of all the things that I love. So martial arts, video games, big cinematic things, because let's face it, in video games, everything's larger than life most of the time. And so it just fits. That's kind of how I found it.
I'm almost hesitant to ask about your first experience putting a suit on.
I got a little excited. I'm just going to say that. Jumping around and like trying to roll around and realize that those markers that you have, those little
painful when you roll on them.
Yeah, they leave very specific bruises. But not always. The suits have gotten a lot better, and you see the latest suits, like the Xsense. I think this is the Rococo that's coming, but maybe not that one. But the Xsense one doesn't actually even have markers anymore. And like the people that are nice, like the guys at Centroid Studios, they have padded floors, so you know, you don't.
You can tell you can tell the quality of the studio instantly.
Literally, I can feel it in my bones.
Okay, so I'm kind of interested here because you're both stepping from something that people might consider as quite traditional, like economics or business studies, and then boring. You know, I'm not going to say boring because there are a lot of people who probably find this stuff very interesting, and I'm sure we have a lot of Excel, you know, fans listening to this show. So I'm just going to say, you know, traditional. And you've all kind of moved into something quite different. And I am kind of curious in terms of what's the biggest learning that you've had in this process? And I know that it's still quite early in the process for both of you, but I am curious to know, what is that one thing that you kind of, at a distance, when you're still in your kind of safe traditional world, you're looking at it going, that would be really easy, or, you know, that would be straightforward. And then you get to it and you're just like, holy crap, nobody told me it was going to be like this. What has been that significant learning for you? I'll start over here.
Yeah, I would say never underestimate the number of time which would be required for you to do the proper setup. Like, never do it.
Tech is important. I'd say, like, we probably underestimated how important it is to make it like more social. So even though we started with an idea of making an escape room and then moved to like VR escape room, blah blah blah. We had this idea of making it as social as possible at the beginning, but still, for many people, bringing the headset on is a very weird thing to do, and they immediately feel like insecure or too geeky. So encouraging them that they are surrounded by friends, they are like not alone, that they're all together doing something, that's probably the single most important thing that we've learned.
Because I imagine a lot of people are very self-conscious when they step into your booths for the first time.
What helps, however, is when they see each other in virtual reality. That brings them comfort immediately. And even if the experience is a bit scary for them or making them uncomfortable, if they see their partner there in VR shooting someone as well, like exactly, like basically protecting them from something, that's very comforting for a lot of people.
Okay. What was your big learning, Marta?
From my transition, beginning.
Your new beginning.
My new beginning. Is that the things that I thought were going to be hard were usually the easy parts. Mm-hmm. And the things that I thought were just kind of like, you know, the hygiene stuff, just get it done, whatever, were the things where the biggest learnings happened. So if I put it into one of the contexts of let's say mocap, I thought the difficult things were going to be the big jumps and the physically demanding, like, you know, tumbles or whatever it is, or fights or whatever it was. But it actually ended up being remembering to finish the move in the same pose, the same idle. It's called an idle. So when the player's not doing anything, what is the character that you're sort of capturing the performance for doing? They can't just freeze. They have to look alive. And in order to stitch different animations together, you need to start and finish in the same pose, so it's seamless. So whenever that's not seamless, you see that every gamer has seen this happen in a game where just kind of the character jumps into another pose instantly. Yeah. That's when things got a little sloppy in the animation. And so learning how to, you know, jump and roll and do whatever, and then literally finish in the exact same pose, feet like head to toes as I started. that was a big challenge. And understanding how to work around a head-mounted camera, for example. I thought they just put that thing on your head and then you do your thing. Turns out it gets in the way a lot. So those are some of the big learnings. At the same time, also that a lot of the things that I learned in business school and in traditional education became very useful as well in this, in terms of marketing yourself, in terms of being professional and understanding, sort of reading market trends and things like that.
So here's an interesting thing that I want to kind of pick up on here, which is that all of you are not in what would be considered traditional employment. So there's no employer and there's no...
still have a day job.
Well, technically. But in terms of, you don't have that job spec kind of employer and PAYE and things like that going on. I'm kind of curious from your perspective what the learnings have been from an entrepreneurial perspective, because as an entrepreneur, there's so much that you have to figure out, whether it's marketing yourselves, whether it's putting together your forecasting, whatever that thing is, you've had to, figure out how to do these things for yourself rather than have an employer who just kind of says, this is your job, this is the objective, go do it. You're kind of having to figure that stuff out for yourselves. So I'm curious from that perspective, whether or not there have been any specific entrepreneurial learnings as well.
I mean, quite a lot again, because first of all,
you have to be jack of all trades, I would say. I mean, you have to be the one that can fix everything whenever
and talk to clients, and do the partnerships and etc. But what I found really hard at first is finding the right people, to be honest, because we found quite a lot of people who are interested in VR or just had gaming experience in VR, and we found quite a lot of people who had very good customer experience, exactly. But combining those two together is not always that easy as it seems, because sometimes people with excellent VR experience were not the best, client facing type of employees. So that's what we found quite. Well, we had to teach people a lot indeed, but also just choosing them was a huge challenge. We were surprised, but we I don't know, we received 200, 300s of CVs, and I think they keep coming actually. But just finding a couple of really, really good employees was a big challenge, I would say.
It's interesting you say this, because one of the things I have noted, whether it's in a VR arcade or VR demos, where you've got the consuming public trying on headsets and you've got people assisting with that process, I do find that there are a lot of people who aren't particularly well trained in how to transition different people into a headset. And I say this on the basis of a lot of people, and you've talked about how a lot of the people who come here aren't necessarily experienced with the VR. A lot of people, when you seeing them in these scenarios, you've got this member of staff who's literally shoving a headset straight onto their face, and you're just like, chill out, dude. Give them a second to get used to this thing, this big black box that you're kind of invading their personal space with.
It's a bit invasive, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like you're coming at them with a big box, right in their face. So
we start with controllers all the time. So they start with the similar things, like, hey, this thing looks like a gun or something. This is a trigger, blah, blah, blah. So they take at least 7 minutes, I'd say, to explain. They start playing with the controllers while they're off. So they can get used to that feeling at least. And we also, we tend to recommend the first game straight away, so they know the controls of the first game already, even before putting on the headset. Obviously, that time is not included in their actual session, so the session only starts when the game starts.
The headset is on you.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
possibly shoved on your head. But while we're talking about this, and I have to say this because I'm really, really pleased to see that you have masks that you're giving to people, because it's one of my personal pet bugbears is when people don't offer a mask. And I actually went to an event, I'm not going to name names here, I went to an event where they actually had masks on the table that they could have offered to people, but nobody was giving them to the actual consumers, because the consumers didn't know to ask for them, because they didn't know that they needed them. But the people who were giving, the sessions and putting the headsets on should have known to just kind of say, you need to put this on, rather than just waiting for somebody to ask them, because nobody's going to ask them for a mask. Yeah. So just a personal bugbear. But Marta, let's talk about for you. What are the entrepreneurial learnings from a freelance perspective as a kind of a stage combatant versus your day job?
Doing your own tax returns. The first time you do that is an experience and a half. But, coming from the startup world, I had a really great sort of insight into, I was very close to the various things that happened. So that was a great experience. And also within business school, you go through the finance modules, you go through the marketing modules, you go through management and all these different things. And, at the end of the day, you're still business. Whether you're one person or 10,000 people, there are certain things you have to do that aren't just tax returns. They are, you still have to have a website that you have to build somehow that has to look good enough. You need to have assets for that and content for that. You need to have a social media presence, at least if you want to be known. You need to, have your accounts straight. You need to have a system of following up with people. That's a big one that people overlook. They just think numbers and the website and some kind of Twitter account they probably automate. I'd say it's so much more because you need to network and then have a way to follow up with those people. So you can use a basic CRM system, but you don't have to. But you need some way to see, well, I've already spoken to this person, especially if you're speaking to a lot of different people, you're going to all these different conventions like EGX, Gamescom, whatever it is. You need that kind of business like approach to it, even if it's just you or a couple of people. And when it comes to, people management, I like to go by the principle that you need to divide what you need into things that you can teach and things that are inherently like personal characteristics and traits. So is the person very personable? Great. That's something that they have. Do they know VR? No, but you can train them in that. So there's a certain trade-off that you can make when you find the right person, resources permitting, you train them up and give them the opportunity to do this right and use the strengths that you recognize. So I really thought that was a very good learning, because even as a freelancer, I work in teams. I rarely work by myself, and picking the right partners in certain endeavors is key in the same way as choosing certain employees.
Okay, so in all of this, as the new arena that you've stepped into, what would be the one piece of advice that you would give to anybody else who's contemplating following in your footsteps or joining you at some point in the future? What would be the single biggest, most valuable piece of advice that you could give to anybody who's thinking about that?
Probably think communities, not companies. So if you see two companies in London doing VR, they're probably not even competitors at this moment. They have so much to learn from each other at this point. So we don't necessarily see other people who are doing the same thing aggressively. We do think that they have to learn from us, and we do have to learn from them. And I think that's the important thing to build this community further, because like currently it is so small, it's so niche, and so few people know about anything that probably like learning from each other and like networking all the time is very important.
I would actually agree on that. Always seek for advice, always seek for help, always listen to what others tell you.
And feedback. Obviously, do ask for feedback from customers, from anyone really, even if it's really honest and brutal.
Try to communicate with everyone, like starting from escape rooms, which is kind of like some people see as a similar business, and into local shops which can give out your flyers. Be friendly. That's like, I would say, the best.
Yeah, that's what we're sort of trying to do.
Okay, so don't burn bridges. Good advice.
From my perspective, especially for VR, I'd say focus on customer experience. Get that right. And see, you guys here have very heavily invested in that. Like everything looks complete and like a proper system. But so often these days, you still come across different events. And I'm
not going to name names.
Exactly. No names, but just FYI.
Yeah.
Where, they just think that the hype of VR is going to do the job for them.
Yeah.
No, focus on everything from getting the wire management right to giving enough space for people to move around, to getting the right experiences, really no queuing. Exactly. And getting the masks and everything, focus on the customer and making that experience as seamless and smooth as possible. And then from a more business perspective, for business development, I would say go to any and all events you can and network your butt off.
Okay, I'm going to put some context on this one, because there is literally an event every single night of the week in London, if you live in London or any major city for that matter. So I just say pace yourself and give yourself a little bit of, leeway, because I'll tell you what, you can get pretty worn out with the amount of events that there are out there.
Fair enough. Agreed. I might have gone a little too overboard, but still, do not underestimate the importance of going to events, especially bigger conventions and things like that. Yeah. I saw some really interesting stuff at Develop in Brighton, for example. And the big names, at least try to hit those and have business cards and make connections. The amount of people who turn up without a business card. Amazing in this day and age.
But having said all of that, I want to thank you all for joining us on this Digital Jam session. But as always, we like to give our listeners a way to find out a little bit more about you and what you're up to. And we ask you to do that by sharing with us your social media handle of choice. What would that be?
Facebook. Definitely.
Yeah, definitely Facebook.
Yeah. And what is the name on Facebook?
DNA VR, just in one word, I think.
Okay, wonderful. And what?
And for me, it's Twitter. Follow me at martholio. And if you want to add me on LinkedIn as well, you can find me at Marta Svetek.
Wonderful. Thank you. Now, since we are here at DNA VR, why don't you give the listeners a little bit more of a sense of what you're up to here? 10 VR bays that you've got here for people to experience, and what kind of generalistic...
Sure. So we have 10 HTC Vives, and those are divided into 6 are dedicated for escape room type of experience, but in VR. And 4 are for multiplayer and single player games, where people up to 4 players can all be at the same type of VR world together, shooting arrows or shooting zombies or not shooting necessarily. So yes, and there are some booths where you can watch each other and take turns. So yeah, and we are, as I've already mentioned, we are trying to make it as social as possible. So there is like a waiting area where you can enjoy some old school gaming, as I think that was a popular idea before. So yes, that's us.
And the nearest tube station is?
It's Kentish Town or Caledonian Road. Basically, it's 10 minutes from Camden anyway.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you for listening. And as always, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to subscribe and review, and follow us on Twitter at Digital Jam Ltd. Thinking of starting your own podcast? Why not speak to the GL Pro UK team? They handle all of our podcasting service needs. Tell them that Digital Jam Session sent you, and you'll get 10% off your first order. Find out more at www.glpro.co.uk. DigitalJamSessions.com